Good morning. Our News 5 team is on Ambergris Key to cover the Belize Investment Summit 2023. And yesterday we got an opportunity to do an exclusive interview with the former president of Colombia, Ivan Duque Marquez. Here's that interview. First of all, welcome to Belize.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a great honor to be in this amazing country.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. I note that you are on the bill as the guest speaker for this year's investment summit. First of all, let's talk a bit about what are some of the key messages that you intend to present to those that will be in attendance for that presentation.
Well, as you know, I think Belize is a land of opportunity, of innovation and transformation. And I'm here to speak about the three colors that combined can be able to give Belize the dynamic for the future in economic, social, and also in investment terms. So we're talking about the orange economy, the creative economy, the innovative economy, the green economy, and the blue economy. Green and blue referring to all this beautiful land full of biodiversity, but also one of the most important coral reefs reserves around the world, and all these atolls that have this amazing linkage with nature. So those three colors are combined, and Belize gets to provide more incentives to bring the film industry and also to make the cultural economy a big engine of social transformation. And you combine it with the blue bonds, the green finance, and at the same time, you make Belize in the land of blue ecotourism in this hemisphere. What we will have is not only the doubling, but maybe the tripling of GDP within the next decade or 15 years. So we're talking about that potential, and that's what I want to share with all the participants, but also sharing some of the lessons we had from the orange economy in Colombia, from the green taxonomy, from the 30 by 30 initiative that we achieved in 2022, and also the immense potential of protecting the coral reefs as one of the most interesting ways of mobilizing environmental philanthropy around the world to protect this treasure.
How do you translate conservation in terms of the blue and green economy to a group of businessmen and women and investors? How do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think you have seen something very interesting in Belize, and it has to do primarily with the idea that Belize was successful issuing a blue bond, and it was able to get a great premium or a discount in the way they managed that very important initiative, and it was one of the largest in the world before Ecuador made the bond issuance regarding the Galapagos protected area. So today, that experience can also turn into something that is more practical, which is a real debt substitution vis-a-vis climate action regarding the protection of the coral reefs. Why? Because this is one of the treasures of atolls around the world. Belize has one of the most important coral reefs centers around the planet. And if we protect the coral reefs, we're giving a message that we're protecting areas that represent 45% of maritime life. And if we do it correctly, and we also demonstrate to the world that if we protect the coral reefs, we will also be capturing CO2. And if we show the world that when you have a protected coral reef versus those that are now being affected by trawling practices, practices that basically releases the same carbon dioxide on an annual basis that the air and space industry, we're going to be showing the world that if you protect the coral reefs in Belize, you can do it in a sustainable way by mobilizing capital. Now, financial instruments are important, and that's where you have ESG bonds, but also when you have a green taxonomy, and that's also when you have carbon credits, either blue or green. So that's part of the green and blue economy that, combined with the orange economy, can make ecotourism with culture, sea protection, and also biodiversity protection a great transformation of the Belizean economy looking for the decades ahead.
In 2020, you announced at the UN Ocean Conference that Colombia had achieved protecting 30% of his ocean. I believe you're above 30%
In
at this
fact,
point.
yes, we started at 13% at the beginning of
13.
my administration. We had a compromise to the 30 by 30 initiative, but we did it in 2022. And how did we do it? We worked with academia, we worked with the scientific community, and we were able to pass from literally 13% to almost 34% protected areas in the Colombian Maritime Territory, but we also did it in land. So basically today we have almost 34% of the Colombian territory, maritime and inland, that represents a protected area of around 34% of our territory.
And what is the economic implications, or what are the economic implications
Well,
or
that's
benefits
interesting
of that?
because at the beginning, there are people who try to make a pushback under the idea that you're going to affect, for example,
Fishing?
artisanal fishermen, and then you demonstrate something that is critical. Today, the scuba diving tourism, the exploration tourism, can generate for people who are providers of services to that industry more than 10 times or 20 times the income they could generate as artists and fishermen. So you need to integrate them into this new conservation economy. It makes extreme sense, but at the same time, it provides benefits. So you do good and you do well as a country because you're protecting, but also integrating communities into the conservation economy.
I know that Belize has made this commitment also under the Blue Bond to protect 30% of our oceans. Is there a challenge when it comes to enforcement of such protected areas?
Of course, there is. You have
And
to.
how
You
do
have
we?
to. You need to use law and order, but it's also interesting when communities have the buy-in and understand the impact of conservation. They also become protectors of the ecosystems. Trawling practices around the world are destroying coral reefs in a very complicated way. Just to give you an idea, trawling practices, as I mentioned before, every year by the destruction of the coral reefs are releasing more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than the air and space industry in 1 year.
Wow.
So we need to act. But at the same time, what is interesting is when you start saying no to those practices and you start conserving and you bring communities to enjoy this beauty, and they can do it by sustainable ecotourism and also triggering scuba diving tourism, a responsible fishery, and at the same time other water sports and just enjoying the pleasure of nature, that makes the inflow of dollars more dynamic than just by keeping the traditional approach, which is to look to the other side when you have those kind of threats.
Yeah.
So in the case of Belize, what I found responsible and also a reference model is that the government has said, we want to protect. We want to continuously protect. We want to expand the conservation and protected areas, but we also want the world to come and enjoy. And that's why you're seeing right now that when people look at Belize, they see it as the Latin American version of Polynesia.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing all these big, responsible, but also high-end tourism brands coming to Belize. This is going to generate a new economic perspective for the country. And I think that's also important. And you have to include communities. When you include communities in the conservation economy, they also benefit. And they become one of the most important guarantors of biodiversity in that territory.
I think it's important that you make mention of having a community inclusive approach, because there's always this apparent tug and war between conservation and development, and it appears as if you have to take one side, and it's you become controversial when you're in the middle, that there's room for conservation and there's also room for development. I take, for example, your work in the Amazon with Concordia, the Concordia Amazon Initiative. Deforestation, one of the significant issues faced within the Amazon, and has a lot to do with agriculture.
Well, actually, Paul, when you look at what has happened, for example, in the Amazon, in the specific case of the Amazon, due to deforestation, in the last 4 decades, we have lost the equivalent in size of Germany and France together. So we have lost more than 20% of the Amazon land due to deforestation in the last 4 decades. We have also seen a major destruction of wildlife. But the thing is, if this pattern continues, the Amazon is no longer going to be a contention wall when it comes to emissions, but it's going to become a net emitter. And if that happens, we would have lost everything that we have done with this great patrimony of biodiversity. That's why we have to protect. But in order to generate effective protection, you need to develop a new economy. And it's a conservation, carbon neutral, responsible, ecotouristic, and green entrepreneur community to make those changes happen. It doesn't happen overnight. So the potential that Belize has is that this country has already taken to heart conservation. This is one of the countries with the most protected coral reefs in the planet. And if the world gets to know this and enjoy this and share it, and at the same time you bring to this country a dynamic orange economy with culture, cinema, movie production, and at the same time the offer of its own root music and talent and poetry and literature, and you combine it with this sea, shore, and this amazing beaches and the coral reefs, and also with the treasure that you have in land with the waterfalls and the amazing sights, and also the heritage that comes from the Mayans in this territory, the world will see something that is absolutely unique, because you never found those things together
Combined.
in one single place. In one single place. So this is the greatest opportunity that I think Belize has to embrace. And my objective here is not to come and preach, but come and share ideas that have been successful, that if accelerated in Belize, can be a new way of generating a sustainable, carbon neutral, effective, and inclusive economy.
I wholeheartedly appreciate how you talk about Belize and how you see Belize and all these economies combined. It's eye-opening for me as well, just listening to you talk. I know that in 2013 you co-authored a document, a book on the orange economy. I believe it was with the IDB, if I'm not mistaken. Let's talk a bit about the orange economy and the potential within the orange economy. You speak about the heritage, you speak the Maya temples, for example. Belize, as much as it is blue rich and green rich, it is also culture rich. How do we, as a developing nation, capitalize on the orange economy in terms of investments? Because I don't imagine that
So-
investors look at this area that
So
much.
Paul, for example, I come from a country like Colombia. People, when they think about Colombia, they think about coffee, right?
Yeah, oof.
And we have very delicious, tasty coffee that I always recommend, obviously. But when you look at the cultural economy, the orange economy, it's larger than the coffee economy. The orange economy in Colombia is larger than mining, and it's larger than many commodities that we know of. Why? Because people acknowledge that when you look at heritage, museums, patrimony, heritage sites, and you combine it with the arts, with functional creations, and with media, that is almost 3.5% of our GDP and growing. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen just in a Sylvester way. It happens because when you combine the right incentives, and you tell, for example, the movie industry, come here, you'll get a rebate, and you start generating jobs within that economy, the value triggers immediately. That's why one of the fastest growing sectors in Colombia, and that was crucial in the economic recovery in a post-pandemic world, was the orange economy. And that's why, for example, with the incentives that we created, we passed from an average $20 million investment in the movies and series production to more than $300 million. So imagine if a country like Belize combines the heritage of these amazing sites with such a beautiful patrimony, of this amazing green that you have inland, that can be beautiful for movie production, and then you combine it with this amazing coral reefs and this beautiful ocean sites and landscapes,
Yeah.
you can make this country one of the most interesting markets for movie production in Latin America. But that's not all. Imagine if the Garifuna music gets to be listened with your own great bands throughout the hemisphere. And imagine if you create cultural infrastructure that can bring tourists, and even the tourists that come in cruises, and they, for the day they decide to stay, they can go to a site where they can listen to the Garifuna music, or you have more festivals, or you have more offer of arts and crafts, or more offer of traditional creations. That is also a major trigger of economic transformation. So the orange economy is a reality. It's a reality in a country like mine, but it's a reality also here in Belize. But what you need to do is to integrate the Minister of Culture, the Minister of Tourism, and the Minister of Finance and say, you know what, we're going to make a big bet. We're going to get these incentives. We want to see more entrepreneurs in the orange economy from Belize. But we also want to bring investors from abroad to partner with the locals. And then you'll have a new economy that when you realize is going to be growing than many commodities markets that you already have in the country. And it's a bet for the future because it's based on talent.
Yeah.
So in times when people think about artificial intelligence, I don't think there's any artificial talent. You'll be praising human capital, you'll be praising human talent, and that is one of the greatest richness of Belize.
You speak about artificial intelligence. Where does technology fit into the conversation of the orange economy? Because traditionally, I would imagine when we think of the orange economy, we think of, all right, we think of culture, we think of heritage. There is a space for technology as
Yes,
well.
of course. Because when you look at the whole orange economy today, digital plays a big role. Imagine if you allow all the Belizean Garifuna music to be known around the world through digital technology.
Yeah.
Imagine if you also have animation, if you have sound production, if you have post production, if you have editing. Also here, creating an industry and opening the room for your jobs in the youngest communities. Well, they're going to use their talent and they're going to combine it with technology, and Belize can become a service providers. Are you, as you are already doing now in BPO services, imagine if those BPO services will on the same scale, but on cultural services, and you can do post-production, you can do doubling. But you also have the richness of having a multi-language country, where you have people that are fluent in English, fluent in Spanish, and that is an asset.
Yeah.
So transforming those assets through technology and culture, but also on conservation and allowing the world to enjoy the richness of this great coral reef treasure, that is simply the new way of looking at the Belizean economy. That is not to leave aside other sectors that are already impactful. You have to keep those, but you're looking to the future in a land of opportunity for new generations.
And you're talking here about creating employment opportunities as well, which
Well,
is
one of the nicest things about Belize is that when you look at the whole Latin American and Caribbean region, you have an employment rate that is something close to 2.8%, which is
2.8%.
almost full employment. That's a big achievement. But also imagine if you continue generating new opportunities and you allow the human capital through talent to be employed where the talent is, and that has to do with music, with the arts, with functional creations. What you're going to be able to do is the same thing that you're doing now with call centers, where a young person gets employed and they can win by the or earn by the hour, maybe 2 or 3 times the minimum wage in an hourly basis. The same thing can happen in the orange economy, but even higher. Even they can earn more than what they could do in a call center if they're employing their talent and their human capital in a sector in which they can contribute more. That simply generates more dynamic. And I think those are the bets that the countries need to make. So I'm so delighted when I see the Prime Minister talking about the orange economy and integrating with the blue economy and the green economy and biotourism and ecotourism. I think there's a great focus on the future. So if you work, as I regularly mention about the movie The Field of Dreams, where there's this amazing phrase that says, if you build it, they will come. If you build the right incentives, the right infrastructure, the right motivation, the right training, you can make Belize land of opportunity, not only for the locals, but also you can bring all these digital nomads around the world wanting to come to this amazing place because, you know, they have the landscape,
Yeah.
but they also have the right regulation. So those are the things that I'm going to talk about during this summit.
Finally, I'd like to take a moment to just have you share briefly about your work, the work that you're doing with the Concordia Amazon Initiative.
Thank you, Paul.
I think it's a huge initiative, and I'd like for you to share a bit of why Belize, that is a far-flung nation from South America, should also consider the importance of protecting and conserving the Amazon.
Well, I think when we look at the climate crisis we face, the climate crisis is affecting us all. And maybe countries that represent not too much in the annual emissions are one of the most threatened by the effects of climate change. Actually, Belize is one of the most threatened countries by the effects of climate change because the raise in the ocean temperatures basically starts triggering more hurricanes category 4 and 5. Now, this country is protected in some sort of way by this amazing coral reef that is like a contention wall, but it's highly, highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And if we really want to make a strong result in climate action, we need to work on conservation. But if we don't do the right things in the Amazon, we're not going to be successful in fighting climate change just because we have to understand that the Amazon is almost the size of the United States without Alaska and few areas. It's almost 6 million square kilometers and it has almost 50 million people, but it's the world's most important biodiversity hotspot. And it's affected by deforestation and by negative land use. So what we're trying to promote through Concordia is public-private partnerships concentrated on market-driven, nature-based solutions so that we can identify mechanisms to stop deforestation, make economic transformation, allow a better income for communities, involve indigenous communities in conservation, and be able to effectively protect the Amazon. Because we can assume that we're going to make everything right, but if we don't get right what has to be done in the Amazon, we're not going to achieve the global objectives for 2030 or 2050. So that's why through Concordia, we're trying to get together all this group of experts from all the sectors and try to connect the dots and identify market-driven, nature-based solutions that can protect this amazing land of the Amazon, where most of the most unrecognized species or substantial species for the planet have their homeland.
Mr. Duque, thank you very much
Thank you so much,
for your
Paul.
time.
It's been an
Truly
amazing
appreciate it.
pleasure.